The training grounds of Sector 7 fell silent as Lieutenant Sarah Chen stepped through the reinforced doors. 200 pairs of eyes, some with vertical pupils, others with compound lenses, and a few that existed in spectrums she couldn't perceive, turned to assess the newcomer. She was the first human to be assigned to the Galactic Coalition's elite combat training program, and everyone knew it. Instructor Vexthor, a towering Kryn warrior whose species had dominated the military ranks for 3 centuries, stood at the center of the arena. His 4 arms crossed in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of skepticism. "The human," he announced, his translator rendering his growls into flat, emotionless words. "You will observe today. Tomorrow we assess if your species is capable of keeping pace." Sarah nodded curtly, moving to the observation area where other first-day recruits waited. But something unexpected happened. From the far corner of the training ground, where the Stellar Dawn was a cargo freighter like any other in the Andromeda trade route. Rusty, reliable, and running on prayers and duct tape. Captain Jack Morrison had purchased the vessel 3 cycles ago with his last credits, determined to make an honest living hauling freight across the galaxy. The ship came with a small crew, most of whom had jumped ship within the first month. All except Jennifer. Jennifer wasn't human. She was a Zeltari, a species known across the galaxy for their exceptional culinary skills and their unfortunate position at the bottom of the galactic social hierarchy. Small and fragile, with luminescent blue skin and large golden eyes, the Zeltari had been subjugated centuries ago. They were the cooks, the cleaners, the servants, never the captains or the traders. Jack had found Jennifer huddled in the ship's galley when he'd first bought the Stellar Dawn. The previous owner had included her in the sale like a kitchen appliance. Jack had been horrified, but Jennifer had begged to stay. She had nowhere else to go, she'd explained in her soft, melodic voice. At least here she had a purpose. So Jack had kept her on, but with conditions. She was crew, not property. She earned a wage, small as his budget allowed. She ate at the table with him, not after him. Jennifer had wept the first time he'd insisted on it. For 3, the youngest cadets, the Cubs as they were universally called, were running formation drills. A small figure broke ranks. Then another, and another. Within seconds, a dozen juvenile aliens of various species had abandoned their exercise and were rushing across the arena floor, directly toward Sarah. The instructors froze in shock. Such breach of discipline was unthinkable. In Galactic Coalition military culture, order was paramount. Cubs were taught from their first day that the pack moved as one, that individual action was a symptom of weakness. Yet here they came, a young Kryn barely up to Sarah's waist, his downy fur still soft and unbanded. A Thressin hatchling, her carapace still translucent with youth. A Voller pup whose wings hadn't yet developed flight membranes. Others followed, representing a dozen species, all moving with the same desperate urgency. They swarmed around Sarah, chirping and chittering and making sounds of distress in their native languages. The young Kryn wrapped his small arms around her leg. The Thressin pressed against her side, trembling. Others reached for her hands, her arms seeking contact. Sarah dropped to one knee instinctively, her hands moving to comfort the small beings clustering around her. Hey, it's okay," she murmured, her voice soft. "What's wrong?" Instructor Vexthor strode forward, his face twisted in anger. "Cubs, return to formation." His voice boomed across the training ground with enough force to make the walls vibrate. The young ones pressed closer to Sarah, making sounds of fear. Sarah looked up at the towering instructor, her jaw set. "Sir, permission to speak?" "You have no permission here, human. You are an observer. With respect, sir, something's clearly wrong with these kids." She kept her voice level, one hand stroking the downy fur of the Kryn cub, the other patting the Thressin's carapace in a rhythmic, soothing pattern. "They're terrified. They are cubs," Vexthor snarled. "They are learning discipline. Fear is the first lesson." Sarah's eyes hardened. She had 2 nephews back on Earth, and she'd spent enough time around scared kids to recognize trauma when she saw it. These weren't students learning discipline. These were children crying for help. "How long have they been training today?" she asked quietly. "That is not your concern." "How long?" A different instructor, a slender Velor named Shirik, spoke up from the side. 14 hours. Standard training protocol for cubs." 14. Sarah bit off her response, forcing herself to remain calm. The young ones around her had grown quieter, responding to her presence. The Kryn cub had stopped trembling. The Thressin's chittering had softened to a gentle hum. She looked at each small face, seeing exhaustion, hunger, and something else, a desperate hope that had sparked when she entered the room. "On Earth," Sarah said, standing slowly, careful not to dislodge the cubs who clung to her, "we have a saying. It takes a village to raise a child, not a pack, not a formation. A village, a community that cares for its young." Vexthor's translator emitted a sound of disgust, weakness. "The coalition's strength comes from uniformity, from the suppression of individual need for the greater whole." "Does it?" Sarah met his eyes. "Then why are your cubs breaking formation for the first time in your career? Why are they running to me, a stranger, instead of you, their instructor?" Silence fell across the training ground. "Because," Sarah continued, her voice steady, "strength doesn't come from breaking children down until they're too afraid to think for themselves. Real strength comes from building them up, from teaching them that their pack, their village, will be there when they need help." She looked down at the young Kryn still holding her leg. "When's the last time someone told you that you were doing a good job?" The cub's translator was simple, designed for basic communication, but his words came through clearly. Never. Cubs must earn praise through perfection. Sarah felt something crack in her chest. She knelt again, gathering as many of the small beings into her arms as she could. "You're all doing an amazing job," she said firmly. "Learning to be strong is hard. Being here, trying your best even when you're scared and tired, that takes real courage." The cubs made sounds of confusion, as if they'd never heard such words before. Vexthor stepped forward. "Human, you are dismissed from this program. Your species clearly lacks the discipline required for coalition military service." "No." Commander Torvus's voice cut across the arena. The base commander, a grizzled veteran whose species Sarah didn't recognize, moved through the assembled trainees. "She stays. Commander, she has demonstrated something we forgot." Torvus looked at the cubs clustered around Sarah, then at the older cadets watching from across the arena. Many of them had expressions Sarah couldn't read, but body language was universal enough. They were transfixed. "For 300 cycles," Torvus continued, "we have trained warriors by breaking them first. We told ourselves this made them strong. But our retention rates fall each year. Our soldiers fight with precision but without passion. And our cubs." He gestured to the small beings still surrounding Sarah. "Our cubs break rank the moment someone offers them kindness." He turned to Sarah. "Humans are new to the coalition. You've fought in only 3 campaigns. Yet in each one, your soldiers showed something we thought was tactical foolishness. They stayed behind for wounded comrades. They shared rations with allied species. They sang songs during long marches." He paused. "They called each other by chosen names rather than designation numbers." Sarah stood, a cub in her arms. Others clustered around her legs. "On Earth, we learned a long time ago that the strongest warriors are the ones who have something worth protecting. You can't protect what you don't love, and you can't love what you've been taught to see as a burden." Torvus nodded slowly. "Lieutenant Chen, your assignment has changed. You will continue combat training, but you will also work with Instructor Shirik to develop new protocols for cub training. Protocols that incorporate your human concept of..." He paused, testing the word. "Village." Vexthor's 4 arms tensed. "Commander, this is a violation of 3 centuries of tradition." "Traditions can change, Instructor. And if they don't, they die." Torvus looked at the young cadets still clustered around the human who had shown them something they'd never experienced before. "Perhaps it's time we learned what makes humans willing to die for each other. Perhaps that's the real strength we've been missing." As the training session ended, and the cubs reluctantly returned to their barracks, but not before each one touched Sarah's hand in farewell, word spread through the coalition fleet. The human who had caused cubs to break formation. The human who had challenged the instructors and survived. But more importantly, the human who had knelt in the dust of a training ground and told frightened children that they were enough. It would be years before the full impact was understood. But historians would later mark this as the moment when the Galactic Coalition began to truly understand why humanity, despite being one of the smallest and weakest species physically, had become one of its most formidable members. Not because humans were the best fighters, but because they were the best at making others want to fight alongside them.